are live now on Facebook. To our followers and viewers joining us, thank you so very much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Mona Davids. I am the founder and publisher of LittleAfrica BronxNews. Welcome to our City Council District 16 Candidates Forum. I am joined today by Maimuna Davids, who is the Communications Director and Editor at Social Impact Strategies. My co-host, Mr. Muhammad Mada, the Chairman of the African Advisory Council, will be joining us shortly. He's a bit delayed right now, but he should be with us in the next 15 to 20 minutes. And we are just waiting on Mr. Amadou Diallo, who will be joining us in the next few minutes. But right now with us, I'd like to introduce our candidates, Ms. Althea Stevens and Mr. Yves Filius. So I'd like us to get the program started. So for our viewers, I'm just gonna quickly go over the run of show. So with today's program, we're going to be covering a variety of topics that are very important to the constituents of District 16. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to do their opening remarks and introduce themselves. And then each candidate as well will have 3 minutes to answer a question. And we are going to be very strict when it comes to time because our recent Bronx Borough President candidate forum went quite a bit over time. Then at 2 points during this forum, the candidates will be able to ask their fellow candidate, their two fellow candidates a question. So we call that the cross-questioning lightning round, which we really are looking forward to in the program. So we're going to get started now. And I'd like to introduce Ms. Althea Stevens. Ms. Stevens, you have 3 minutes. Please introduce yourself.
Of course I'm muted. That's what we do in Zoom now. But my name is Althea Stevens, and before I even introduce myself, I want to say thank you, Mona, for giving us the opportunity to come on and really put out our platform and really have a space for local candidates. As everyone knows, it's really hard for local candidates to get any media coverage and attention. So I just want to say thank you for putting this together and bringing us together, and I'm really excited for the discussion tonight. But for everyone, my name is Althea Stevens. I am a youth developer. I've been in youth development for the last 20 years. And to be honest, that is how I started this road to even thinking about running for office. I do youth forums every year with my young people, and I do 1 or 2 forums every year. And I usually do them on civic engagement and how do we educate young people on being politically involved and just educating them on local politics and politics in general. And my kids in a discussion, they was like, Miss, I don't know why you're always doing this. No one cares. Like, no one ever asks us to vote. No one cares. And I'm like, that's not true. And being who I am, I'm very relentless. And so I really just was hammering at them. And they turned to me and was like, Miss, you should be running. You need to run for office because you care and you're the type of person that we will vote for. So that's really how this journey started. And then when I started to talk to friends and people that I know, they was like, yes, that is true. You should be running. And that's something you should seriously consider. So I started this journey and just really started to hit the ground running to really be in the community, starting to talk to folks and to see what the needs were. I'm a person who don't believe that we should be governing from what we think people need, but from really getting a perspective from our community members and having their input. And so this journey has been a great one in the sense of I've been able to meet a lot of people. That's the best thing about this, being able to talk to people, help people, and support them on this journey. So that is a little bit about myself, and I'm just excited about what the Bronx is going to be in the next couple of years. I think we have a lot of great people running in the Bronx in general right now, and so we are at the cusp of being able to really have real transformational change in the Bronx. So I'm really excited to be a part of this journey for the Bronx.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Our Next candidate, Mr. Yves Filius, please introduce yourself.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again, Moana. Thank you for being leaders in this time, and also thank you, Althea and Amadou, that's here. You know, most importantly is as candidates, we need to showcase who we are, where we're from, and more importantly, how can we work together no matter what. So my name is Yves Filius. I'm very happy to be here, a product of the Bronx, born and raised in the district, product of St. Augustine School, Children's Circle, Daycare Center, Claremont Center After School, tutor at Southeast Bronx Neighborhood Center, also a member of the Martin Luther King Center for Nonviolence, was those that instilled in me the reason that I'm here today. It was the path that was created for the journey that you currently see me at. I learned so much from just growing up in this community. My parents, I'm first generation American. My parents immigrated from Haiti, so I really understand the importance of being in a household where English or Spanish isn't the first or second language spoken. So being a translator at 5 years old, to my grandparents and my parents were going to school and talking to folks. So that is who I am, and I was blessed and to showcase this opportunity at a young age, working in politics, both in the 79th district and the 77th that encapsulates the 16th council. I started as a community liaison, just doing constituent services, and by the time I left this area, I was a field director, pushing, director of outreach, pushing and maintaining a a vision for our community, which would open, from things from doing job fairs to food giveaways, ideas to spark um, the hunger and the need, the necessity for our community. I feel that I'm someone that's always been behind the scenes and understands how being behind the scenes usually you can get overlooked. But this was an opportunity to stand up and say, as a product of the community, that's why I'm here. I would love to showcase, my knowledge and path and being a connector, someone that has always opened doors, and more importantly, doors that have been open for me. I would love to showcase that for other folks. And this is why I'm here. And it's not just my journey, it's our journey collectively. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Filius. And we are joined by Mr. Amadou Diallo. Mr. Amadou Diallo, please introduce yourself. You have 3 minutes to introduce yourself. You are muted, sir.
Good evening, Ms. Mona Davis. Good evening, Sister Althea. Good evening, Brother Eve Filios. It is actually a pleasure to be a part of this forum today. And first of all, I am a proud immigrant. I've been in this country since 1995. I am an American citizen. I have been a founding member of my community's House of Worship, and I've been an activist in the African community, and especially in the Mauritania section of the Bronx, where I have interacted with so many African American and also in the Latino community here in the Bronx. So actually, it is a proud to live the American dream. We are the what they call in the community like the founders of the community. So when we came in first, we never had churches for those who are Christian, and we never had our own mosques for those who are Muslim. So the first thing we did as an immigrant into this country, we built communities. We built mosques, we built churches. And many of our people started bringing their wives and children. Now, many of our children are first time, some have gone to college for those who are born here, and many people have graduated from college and working. Now, the key thing we have to do now is to integrate politically. We are very much involved in the car driving industry, in the small business industry, in the self-employment part of the business, where we believe now we need to take part in the American dream in terms of home ownership, getting involved in government. So I want to thank all of you. I want to be the pioneer of the American dream in terms of the emerging new African American community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Diallo. Just to go over again the run of show for today. My co-host, Mr. Mata, will be on shortly. He's running a little bit late. And for the candidates, please be advised that you have 3 minutes to answer a question. You will get a 30-second warning before your 3 minutes are up. And we ask you to all please, comply with the 3 minutes allotment. So we are going to get this forum started. And the first question goes to Miss Althea Stevens. Ms. Stevens, right now, New York City, the Bronx is dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. This pandemic has been devastating to our communities, in particularly the Bronx. And as you know, that when it comes to our families, when it comes to our small businesses, the Bronx has been impacted the most in the entire city. So my question to you, Ms. Stevens, and it's the same question to our other candidates on this forum. My question to you is, as City Councilwoman, what are your top 3 priorities in helping Bronxites and small businesses recover from this COVID-19 pandemic? What is your recovery plan?
Thank you, Mona. That's a very good question. And for me, I just want to say, one, I wasn't surprised that when this pandemic hit, that the Bronx was hit as hard as we were, right? And we were hit as hard as we were because I tell people all the time, COVID-19 only put a spotlight on all the stuff that was going bad in our neighborhoods and community already, and the things that had been ignored. And so for me, the recovery plan is what we should have been getting anyway. I constantly say this. I am always going to amplify what I'm not asking for things that I'm not asking for anything that we should not have already been getting, right? These are things we deserve and should have been getting already. But my plan especially is to think about this recovery process. We need jobs, right? We need to make sure that we have jobs in our community and people can have a livelihood. So one of the things that I definitely want to make sure that I'll definitely be championing is working with our unions, right? Unions are a place that allows people in our community to have good paying jobs with benefits and stability. So working with unions to create apprenticeships and programs and things like that. So we have a pathway and vocational pathways for young people and families so they can have stable jobs. Also, we have to think about the small businesses who are suffering right now, right? They are suffering and working with state and federal officials to make sure that we provide them with grants. We don't want them to have loans, and that's not going to be very helpful for them because they would have to pay them back. So they will need grants and things like that in order so that they can have a nice recovery. But also we need to have a pipeline in our community for people who live in this community to start their own businesses. So working with the CBOs to really have CBOs starting programs to help people start their businesses. Another huge thing that I think that is going to be really important is the collective impact project, right? And so when we think about collective impact, a lot of CBOs are often fighting for grants, right? And this ties into like the violence and things that we're having in our community. So if we have a collective impact project where CBOs, community leaders, and things are coming together to develop a plan that's really about how are we going to increase the workforce development part of our community, how are we going to decrease crime, and really have a plan and actually assign everyone in the community their responsibility so we can start moving forward.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Mr. Filius, what are your top 3 priorities with your COVID-19 recovery plan for the Bronx and your district?
Thank you, Mona. I appreciate the question. So it's 3 tiers. One is small businesses. You know, we have to measure a place to allow businesses to recover from profit loss. Prime example, you know, within the last 20 years, the Bronx has successfully increased the presence of small businesses, but by only 35%. The priority is not ensuring that this isn't undone, but creating opportunities for recovery that includes new business opportunities, right? Last year with the pandemic, small businesses only received 2% of emergency loans in the Bronx. That is insane. You know, we are the fifth borough in terms of getting all the resources, you know, having small businesses to create a longevity. And that within itself, only receiving 2% of emergency funds is a shame, and it should not happen again, right? Second is employment and housing. That's coupled in one. Both seasonal jobs, like first, my hats off goes to Yankee Stadium, which just yesterday opened up, being a vaccine area. So that is a relief in a way. However, more needs to be done. You know, and with Yankee Stadium comes seasonal jobs and also botanical gardens. You know, big areas in our borough and so forth, as well as permanent positions. Possibly touch on rehabilitating small businesses that can funnel in addressing, you know, employment related issues, right? So we need to sustain our seasonal jobs. Last year, there were how many people that didn't have an opportunity to have their seasonal jobs? These seasonal jobs are currently everyday jobs annually. You know, it's a seasonal job for someone is an annual job for a decade, and it's providing for our households. And lastly, academic resources for our children. You know, children are undoubtedly, you know, affected by this transition to remote learning, and eventually back into our school environment will push, you know, I will be pushing forward for English as second language centers in our community, you know, breaking the barriers between our neighbors, because that is a key. You know, the language barrier is the number one barrier within our community. We have such a diverse community, so we have to find ways to first break down that barrier.
Thank you, Mr. Filius. I see we are joined by Mr. Muhammad Mader, the chairman of the African Advisory Council. We're just going to finish up the third response to the question, and then Mr. Mader will speak. Mr. Diallo, could you please answer the question, what is your COVID-19 recovery plan for the district and for the Bronx? What are your three priorities if elected as councilman?
Thank you very much, Ms. Mona. First of all, if I'm elected councilman, there will be my three priorities, which have been my priorities for the past year since COVID. It has been healthcare, education, and employment. In terms of the healthcare, many of our community have issues with health, and some of them, it has to do with sometimes not having Medicare, or sometimes don't having, you know, proper translation when they go to a hospital. Those are another issue, which I will definitely try to have more in terms of translation, because the key issue here sometimes, even if you go to hospital, you have your own translator, they won't allow you to use your translator. And sometimes they use translators from different countries, which make it difficult for you to understand the dialect, even though you all might be from the same, you know, from the same region. And the second thing, it has to do actually with education. We need to educate our people in terms of at least eating healthy, because most of our problem here is that it has to do with the food. If you look at the COVID-19 here, many people who actually are affected are people with preconditions. People with pre-sickness, when they go to hospital, actually, they just, you know, die because they don't have a better immune system to resist the sickness. And the other area, it has to do with employment. The employment, many of our community here, especially in the Bronx, I see that we need to involve more in the small business ownership. I believe that we need more funding in that area. As part of my job here, I've been doing a lot of application for PPP and for SBA loan for our African or immigrant or people who reside in the district. But many of them tend to be denied due to credit. And sometimes it's really sad. When you qualify, you've been working with IBA or Lyft, or you own self-employment, and SBA could just deny you because of past credit history, and now not looking at the COVID pandemic that affecting all the small businesses. Many people have been denied for little things. Their credit score come up to maybe 580. They say we need to get at least 600, or maybe one of the credit score even give you 6+. And I need those three things actually to focus on where we can assist residents to be able to come out and have their own small businesses. It's an area I believe we need to focus more, because if we are empowering the resident to make their own living, I mean, we can improve the district. So those are my three priorities, and which I will have a detailed plan to focus on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Diallo. Thank you. We are joined by Mr. Muhammad Mada, Chairman of the African Advisory Council of the Bronx Borough President's Office. Mr. Mada, thank you for joining us. Please introduce yourself, and then we'll continue on with the program.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mona, and thank you to our wonderful candidates vying to represent my district. This is where I live, so I have a serious vested interest in this conversation, and I call it a conversation because we are all family here. So we're just here to share ideas and also to hear from our prospective representatives, what their intentions are for our district. So I want to thank them for agreeing to be part of this conversation today. Having said that, I want to thank you, Mona, LittleAfrica, for all the great work you've been doing and putting this together. It's really something that is needed, and we appreciate you very much. So on that note, again, Mohammed Mada, Chair of the African Advisory Council, and I apologize for being late this afternoon. I was actually visiting with the family of the young lady whose son allegedly killed her. So that's why I was a bit tardy getting you on this call. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to co-host this wonderful candidates forum. Thank you, Mona.
Thank you, Mr. Mada. Thank you so very much for all of your support of the initiatives that we've been doing, the civic engagement and community work we've been doing here at LittleAfrica BronxNews. So I'm going to continue on, and some of the candidates touched on this, healthcare. As we all agree, the Bronx has been hit the hardest when it comes to COVID-19. And right now in your district, Yankee Stadium is now a site for COVID-19 vaccinations. So my first, the question is going to Mr. Filius. With everything that's happened here in the Bronx, with families impacted so greatly with this pandemic, and now with the rollout of the vaccine, and as we just learned a few days ago, I think it was the New York Times that did a story on this, but the fact that even though a supermajority of Black and Brown families, mostly in the Bronx, have been impacted by COVID-19, family members have passed away, parents are sick, grandparents are sick. When it's come to the vaccinations, a majority of white New Yorkers have received the vaccinations. We even heard the story about Washington Heights, where folks from Westchester County were getting vaccinations, but senior citizens from Washington Heights, where the vaccination site is located, were not getting vaccinations. So my question, Mr. Filius, and to the other candidates, beginning with Mr. Filius, is, as a community member and as a candidate for city council, what are you going to be doing to encourage Bronxites to get this vaccination?
All right. Well, thank you so much for that really strong question. This is hard because I'm the last of 6 children. Two of my siblings are nurses, and I call the Bronx the essential workers essential worker. We are always on the front lines, and in this borough, in this district, we've lost over 2,000 lives due to COVID. And this is something we have to recognize and see how do we encourage and move our people forward, because they are already at the front lines, from working in the hospitals, being healthcare workers, frontline workers, and we have to look at it through 2 lenses: quality of care for Bronx residents, but also from the employment lens. Healthcare was responsible for the highest job gains over the last 10 years in the Bronx. So this is an industry we have to protect. We also have to look at how COVID um, how COVID care started and versus to what it looks now with these vaccinations. Yes, Yankee Stadium has opened. It's 15,000 vaccines though. We have 1.4 million people in our borough, so we have to be cognizant of that. Are we going to get the adequate supply to ensure that most of our residents get the necessary shots available, right? And lastly, in City Council announced a plan to introduce legislation to expand the workplace protections for healthcare workers in the midst of public health crisis, where doctors, nurses, administration staff, cleaners were putting themselves on the line every day for sick New Yorkers. Um, I would propose legislation. Well, there's legislation right now that would establish just cause and whistleblower protection for healthcare workers, preventing them from being fired for speaking publicly about conditions in their institutions. That's a key. Protecting our essential workers again, not only at home but at the workforce. But lastly, I have been on the forefront. Special shout out to Assemblywoman Joyner, which we've been encouraging, giving out PPEs within the 77th portion of the district of the 16th Council. I'm happy to say, as district leader, I've done a lot of events, just being out there, being forefront, and encouraging our neighbors to get vaccinated.
Thank you, Mr. Phileas. Mr. Diallo?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mona. Well, the question is simple. As a member of my community's funeral home services, I have seen firsthand the devastation of this pandemic, where during the height of the pandemic, we used to go carry out burial. I remember myself calling hospital 24/7, trying to get body out to make sure we bury all our dead. And the key thing here is to encourage people to take the vaccine. Even though we might have limited vaccines available now, but the key thing is prevention is better than cure. We should use all platforms, our masajid, our social media platform, as community leaders, to encourage our people to take the vaccine. Because even though there are so many things people are saying negative things about the vaccine, but I know uh, coming from African descent, I know malaria destroyed so many people in West Africa. The vaccine was the one that was able to help, save that. Even right now, if I'm not travel back home, I need to take the malaria vaccine here before I go back, so that even if I get bite by mosquito, that will prevent me. The key thing here is to encourage our people to take the vaccine. That's the key thing, and we as community leaders should use all our available resources to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Diallo. Ms. Stevens?
Well, I want to start off just saying, one, I think we have to acknowledge why we have so many people in our community who has mistrust about this vaccine and things like that. And so I believe us as community leaders, it's our job to educate the public about it, right? I think that that is where we really need to start, because I I hear a lot of people saying like, we have to tell people to take the vaccine, but that's not our job. Our job is to educate them and give them the information and all the information so that they can make the best decision for themselves and their families. I also want to just to like piggyback off something Ease was talking about as far as like protecting essential workers and things like that. I think those things are super important. We have to make sure that we're funding our public hospitals and making sure that we have nurse to patient ratios down. Those things are important. And the other things too is we have to talk about our food and healthcare in general in the Bronx, right? Like I said before, one of the reasons we were impacted so much by COVID was because we're unhealthy. And so we have to get to a place where people are healthier, having healthier food options, having open space so that they can like ride their bikes. We need more bike lanes. We need places we need a wellness center. I know my assembly person, Chancellor Jackson, she's been really talking about and really trying to spearhead to open up a wellness center in our community, because that's something that we don't have. And that would just, not just about your health, but it's also about trauma and all the things that we deal with on a consistent basis. So I think that it's a holistic approach we need to be thinking about when we're thinking about our recovery from COVID, but also even with this vaccine, it is our job to educate our people about the vaccine and help them make the best decision for themselves and their family.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. I want to continue just talking about health. And this question will start with Mr. Diallo. The Bronx has a very high rate of asthma. We have highways that are crisscrossing the Bronx. As a city councilman, what will you do? What policies would you put forth to help decrease the amount of pollution in the Bronx, as well as deal with the amount of traffic, particularly in areas like the Hunts Point area of the Bronx? Granted, it's not in your district, but this is something that impacts all Bronxites, including District 16 residents.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mona. Yes, I know the asthma pandemic is affecting so many people, especially I know that in the immigrant community, I have even issues, even just a few days ago, a resident of the 16th Councilman District had an issue with the landlord because the carpets will not be replaced, and her son had asthma. And every time he comes in, he got a sickness. And the other issue here that I think in terms of the traffic jam in the Bronx, I see that not only in the Bronx, but throughout the city. And it is, when you look at the city in the 90s or in the early 2000s, you look at now, every corner you go, you see bus lane and you see bike lane. And where people used to move freely, now you only have one lane for everything. And this is the thing that causes actually the traffic jam in the city. I think as a city councilman, the Department of Transportation need to look at how they're redesigning the city. Even though they want to try to make the city more and more modernized for people to use less, to use more public transportation instead of using their own personal car. But we have essential, transportation that needs to be done. In terms of the Hunt Point area, we have most of our food industry coming through there. And you need a trucking industry to move through there. So there are issues that we need to study in terms of environmental issue, and a better study can be done on that. So I will have to have a better study, a better plan on that if I'm elected. And that's an issue that which will be addressed. That's my promise. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Diallo. Mr. Filius?
Could you repeat the question again?
Right now, the Bronx has, as we know, one of the highest asthma rates, not just in the city, but in the country. And when we look at even districts like District 17, which is not your district, but the Hunts Point area, we look at the Cross Bronx that does come through your district. As city council, as a city councilman, what policies, what would you put forth to try to address this environmental crisis particularly this asthma crisis that we're dealing with and traffic crisis that we're dealing with in the Bronx?
Well, thank you so much. That's a great question. I'm a big green initiative person. Grew up in front of Crotona Park, actually on the board of Friends of Crotona Park. And more importantly, I know how asthma has affected my family. And particularly, I have a vision of capping portions of the Cross Bronx Expressway, as well as portions of I-87, where we can add infrastructure to add greenery to absorb the toxicities that are emitting from these vehicles. And partnering with our state elected officials, more importantly, thankfully I have a partner in the state government, Assemblywoman Joyner, who's introducing a bill called SCI, Schools Impacted by Gross Highways, right? Because we have an actual school that's on top of an highway that all our children that are going in this school is absorbing all these toxic fumes, and we wonder why our children aren't performing at the right, at the school level, because of the quality that's around us. If we can cap, certain portions of the highway, add green infrastructure to absorb, this is a way of sustainability of our community. We need to retrofy our community, which is rectifying all the past ills that's happened to us while retrofitting our infrastructure. So I think that is the key, that is the goal. I would love to push, if I have the opportunity to not only become councilman, but to go on a committee like the Parks Committee, partnering up with a huge organization in our borough like the Botanical Gardens, because they're our incubator, and encourage them to come out and, teach our children and our neighbors on green initiatives, planting on the roofs, absorbing all of this toxicity. Even though the Bronx is 24% parkland, it's not working for us in the South Bronx.
Thank you, Mr. Filius. Ms. Stevens, how would you tackle this issue as City Councilwoman?
Yeah, I think Eve's had some great ideas around that, and even with the having green space that would absorb some of this, I think is gonna be really key for us, right? So I think funding and working on projects like the Haven Project to have more green space put into our communities in general. Also planting trees. I think that we're at a place sometimes where we think these issues are more difficult than it needs to be, but we need more trees planted in our communities that help absorb some of these things. Also, there's things like the renewable Rikers Island that also will help create clean energy and things like that for our community. So for me, I'm also a big green person that's really pushing to make sure that we have more green space, more trees in our community that help absorb some of these toxicities. And I know another big push is a lot of people they want more cars off the road, right? So we have to think about what does that look like as well. How do we work with our state electeds to make sure that our bus services and things like that are upgraded and better so that people can use mass transit, right? How do we make sure that that infrastructure is built up so that we can get more cars off the road and get people using mass transit at a better rate?
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. And that concludes our healthcare topic. I'll hand it over to my co-host, Mr. Mata, who is going to start with the housing topic. Mata?
Yes, thank you very much, Mona. So to our candidates, so when the eviction moratorium ends, we know that, a lot of our community members will owe a lot of back rent because, we've been affected severely with the COVID, and a lot of our community members are not getting enough support. So, the question is, how do you plan to support, our community, those who owe the back rent, and also, obviously, when the pandemic subsides, at some point, we're going to have an eviction crisis. Right now, there's an eviction moratorium, so we know that, people are not being evicted because there's a state law. But once that law is lifted, a lot of people are going to face some eviction crisis. So what policies are you going to put in place to make sure that people do not lose their, housing? And also, how do you plan to protect affordable housing? Because these are really key issues in our community. Thank you. And I'm not sure who's starting on this question. Is it Ms. Stevens or Amadou? I think you have the, Mona, you're on mute.
Sorry. The
Okay.
first, it goes to Amadou first, Mr. Mata.
Yeah, thank you. So, Mr. Diallo, that's your question.
Okay, I'm sorry I was on mute. Okay, Mr. Mada, first of all, good evening. And thank you for that visit you did to the family before coming to this forum. And may God bless you.
Dami, thank
Okay,
you.
good, okay. When it comes to the housing eviction prevention, I know it will expire in May. And what I think it will be extended throughout the end of the year. And another thing that we really do need in this country here, I believe, is what we call rental assistance. More targeted rental assistance plans will be devised in a way that it not only help the tenant, but it also help the landlord, because there are many renters that actually the landlord has the burden to pay their taxes and their bill. So what I think here, there should be assistance in terms of maybe government trying to increase their funding, in terms of maybe they will lower their taxes in order for at least there should be equal assistance on both sides, the renter and the landlord. So both will be benefit. So the key thing here, I think, it will be to work with local, state and federal government officials in order to increase the funding. Because I can tell you, as a small business owner and a community service provider, I have so many people who come in here with back rent, and I have some time to assist them filling out form, especially when people trying to get their rent given, forgiven, and which is really affecting not only the people that are living in the district, but it's affecting people throughout the city. And the low income area housing is an area where many people who have qualified previously to rent under the low income, it's just like the Section 8, they have been evicted. Why? Because if their income rises, they're no longer qualified under the same bracket which they qualified previously for the house. It's another area where they're trying to look income guideline for people who live maybe in Wall Street, for someone who live in the 151 or 10451 and 10456 zip code, which is really the income bracket, and that being used is unacceptable. That will be revised. And the rental assistance is an urgent issue. Many people are facing eviction. I have seen so many letters come to my office here with people wanting to know what they need to be, what needs to be done. And if you don't sign even the paper for you to be extended up to May 31, they might even evict you by the end of February. So it's an issue that needs to be addressed by the current official even before this election is over. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I believe Ms. Stevens is next.
So one of my major platform issues is housing as a human right. I believe that it isn't that everyone has a right to a home that is free and free of eviction. And we're a city that pretty much has transitioned to a city that would rather pay for people to be in a shelter than in a permanent home. So I think that it's important that, one, we have programs that are providing families with rent assistance. like I said, it always baffles me that we can pay for people to be in hotels and shelters, but when it's time for a voucher or Section 8, these programs, they are continuously being cut. So I think that we have to make sure that those things are being expanded and continued, right? And so when we talk about like housing in general, right, we have to make sure that when we're thinking about the AMI, and I would definitely be working with our state, local, our state officials to really think about how do we really address the AMIs in our district specifically, right? I mean, across the city, a lot of times our AMIs are a lot higher because they have such a big catchment area and the Manhattan drives it up. So we have to make sure that we have AMIs that reflect our community. And in our district specifically, it's our average income is about $26,000 a year. So we have to build units in that bracket. But also, we also need to have space for mixed income as well. But we have to start with our low income families first, because that's where the crisis is at. So I think we have to get to a place, like I said, to make sure that we are having grants and vouchers and rental assistance programs, because like you guys said, when this moratorium is up, there's going to be mass evictions. We also need to make sure that we are expanding the Right to Counsel Act that I know the City Council member Vanessa Gibson spearhead in the district. And so that's another thing that we need to make sure that we have across our district and across the city, because we know that if a person goes into court and they have counsel with them, it's much more likely that they have a fair shot. So it's important that we have programs like that expanded, and so that when the eviction moratorium is up, that people are not going into court alone, and they have all the information and tools that's necessary for them to be successful and stay in their homes.
All right, thank you. Mr. Filius?
Thank you for the question. I know this very, very well, as again, worked in both assembly and city council in the district. Reaching out to our community-based organizations and funding them is key. You know, organizations like Legal Aid, HRA, making sure that we ensure that the one-shot deal is there, properly funding these organizations. We can go on from Bronx Works, Met Council, Catholic Charities. I remember calling all of these organizations to find out if I could scrounge up enough, you know, for a resident to ensure that they would not be evicted. And like, this is the key and the goal, is to make sure those community neighbors are great neighbors to us. And the only way that we do that is to provide funding. And I will continue to work alongside with my council members to introduce bills containing measures to protect, assist, not only just tenants, but small businesses impacted by COVID with more time to pay rent and debt. Eviction is not only a threat to residential tenants, but commercial tenants as well. And with legislation like this, we'll continue to incorporate anti-harassment measures for renters, like fines for landlords faced for reported cases of harassment. So discretionary funds for our community-based organizations for rental assistance is key.
But how do you plan to protect affordable housing?
By standing up with my delegation, of course, because it's not just me. I will always be a voice, you know, standing up with not just with my neighbors, but with my delegation, ensuring that we push not just preventative ways, if that means pushing for continuing the moratorium for another 6 months, but just being a voice. You know, again, being a voice is key. That's how I could stand, and providing for the current community-based organizations to get the funding needed to ensure that our neighbors don't get evicted. That's how I stand up.
Thank you very much for that answer. I'll now go back to Ms. Davids for the next round of questioning. Mona?
Thank you, Mr. Mata. So continuing with housing, the next question is the usual elephant in the room, which is NYCHA. The city's, I call it the city's biggest slumlord, because that's pretty much what it is. And the first candidate to answer this question will be Ms. Stevens. So there are three parts to this question. I'm going to start with the first two and then the third. So, Ms. Stevens, when was the last time you were in a NYCHA development?
I'm always a NYCHA. So the job that I work at, my office is out of a NYCHA, and I've worked in NYCHA for the last 15 years, and I constantly do work with NYCHA residents. So I'm always in NYCHA. Like NYCHA is like my second home. I tell people all the time I'm in NYCHA than I am in my own apartment.
Okay. So, Miss Stevens, we always hear the same, the same stories, the same horror stories every single year, every winter. We hear the horror stories of no heat, no hot water, broken elevators, dilapidated apartments, mold. These are stories that we hear on a daily basis. And just a couple of days ago in the Bronx, there was a story on Channel 11 about a senior housing complex that there was no heat and hot water. A few weeks ago, another senior in a NYCHA complex passed away because the elevators weren't working and they had to get downstairs, and there was an accident. As a city council woman, how would you advocate and push to hold the city accountable to NYCHA tenants and to NYCHA families? Because the bottom line is they live in the New York City Housing Authority, and putting aside federal funding, it is still the New York City Housing Authority. So how will you help these NYCHA families, these senior citizens, and others who are suffering in NYCHA right now?
So just to start off, one, I'm not waiting until I'm city council to help NYCHA residents because I've already been doing it, right? So I've been working with the group called Residents to Preserve Public Housing. That group started because one of my very dear friends, Princess Jameson, who is the president of Millbrook Houses, came to me and my other friend, Marquise Jenkins, and said, hey, this rad stuff is coming up, this blueprint is happening, we need to do something. And we got to work and we started to organize tenant leaders across the city to come together and really start helping them to wield their power. As a city council person, that's what we need to do. I tell NYCHA resident presidents all the time, if they organize, they will be the most powerful group of people in New York City. They literally could run New York City at this point because they have the numbers. So for me, it's about how do we empower our tenant leaders to really take a leadership role in this process, right? And when we say that it's New York City housing, let's be clear. The federal government has disinvested from NYCHA for years, which is why we're in the situation that we're in. The city has been trying to put money into it, but if we're not getting money from the federal government that we're supposed to be getting, that's why we're in this hole. So for me, it's about how do we organize our tenant leaders and our NYCHA residents to make sure that they're organized and their voices are being heard. Just the other day, they had a call with over 100 people from across the city on their calling to action what they wanted, because they're very clear about what they want. And a lot of times things are being told to them and they're not part of the conversation. And so anything that's going on in NYCHA residents need to be a part of that conversation and also leading that conversation. And as a city council person, I will continue to work with residents across the city to help them develop their plan and be the voice for their homes.
And final question on NYCHA for you, Ms. Stevens. You touched on it. What is your position on the RAD program?
So, I mean, for me, tenants don't want it. And it's not that they don't want it because they don't want to have a nice apartment. They don't want it because they were not part of the conversation. And it's disrespectful, right? Any place else, people will come in and have a conversation and say, hey, this is what we're thinking. Let's come to this table and let's see if it makes sense. But that did not happen in NYCHA. So we have to get to a place where NYCHA residents and resident leaders are not being disrespected. So for them right now, I will support whatever my tenant leaders say. And what they're saying is they need to be a part of the conversation. And if they're not part of the conversation, it's not happening. And I stand with them.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Mr. Filius, When last were you in a NYCHA development?
Weekly. I'm on NYCHA Developments weekly. I'm a product of NYCHA. My parents still live in NYCHA, so when I visit them weekly. And my family, outside of my blood family, is in NYCHA, so I visit them quite frequently. So weekly.
Okay, so Mr. Phileas, again, you hear the horror stories, as you say, you have family who live in NYCHA, you know what's happening on the ground. As a city councilman, what are you going to do? What policies are you going to put forth? What's your plan to help and advocate for NYCHA families?
Okay, so I plan on holding NYCHA accountable for their upkeep, for their infrastructure. Again, I'm a very green-oriented person. The infrastructure that was created in NYCHA over 50 years ago has been falling apart, and we've never gotten the opportunity to fix it and sustain in it. If NYCHA was supposed to have been created for temporary housing, well, it failed in its part of creating that type of housing for us. There's over 400,000 residents in our communities, and many of which in the NYCHA community, many of which are seniors. The problem is we don't have enough initiatives in our city council offices directly to collect complaints and address them in masses. So as a council member, I would like to offer a hotline just for NYCHA residents in my office, collecting data. So biannually, I could present it to the future TA president. I will continue fighting with my TAs across the district, which I already have relationships with. And, because they are the ones on the ground. I see them every day voicing their opinion, whether it's on Facebook, bumping into them, just asking what is the issue. And to piggyback on what you said earlier about the woman who passed away, the elderly woman, she not only passed away in the district, but it was right across the street from my church. So this was very impactful for, the community, my church family, but this should not have happened at all. And that is a shame. And lastly, accountability. I have to hold NYCHA accountable for their lack of work. I feel like they're saying that we are the solution, but we as tenants are the solution, but they're creating the problem. Where's the money going? Where is the money going? We're afraid of losing our homes. In order to make this better, we have to take it away from you. Like that is the consensus. All right, I'll stop right there.
Thank you, Mr. Phileas. Mr. Diallo, when last were you in a NYCHA development?
Last night, one of my team members was giving out food. I was there, assisting. And I go to NYCHA development more than 4 times during the week as a food distributor. I go throughout the NYCHA development, especially in the 16. So that has been like my second home.
So, Mr. Diallo, with everything going on with NYCHA, with every winter, hearing the stories, seeing the stories about no heat, no hot water, broken elevators, dilapidated apartments, no repairs. As city councilman, if you're elected city councilman, what will you do? What is your strategic plan, and what policies would you put forth to help NYCHA tenants, to help NYCHA families?
Well, the very first thing is to make sure to hold NYCHA accountable and make sure they improve their management. Because as a community service, as I told you, we got so many complaints. Even other people that live, community members that live in NYCHA, they even afraid of a call 311. And the worst thing about it, some of them, they don't even know about the tenant association which exists. So that's another area. As I go around doing food distribution, I talk with tenant leaders. I tell them, listen, you need to get all the tenants. There are so many immigrants that live in NYCHA building which have no even knowledge about tenant association existence. So they don't even know where to go for help. You know what I mean? The last time A cousin of mine called me. She had to go to work. Oh, the elevator is not working. And she's doing a home health aid. And the person where they're supposed to go to, the person who worked during the 12-hour shift, the nighttime, she needs to be there in order for that person to go home to her children. It was really difficult. It took them another 3 to 4 hours for them to get replacement, and she could not even go. And many of them called me to tell me, listen, we have a problem, what to do. I keep telling them, you need to go to the local elected official because it's part of their duty to help. So if I am elected, the very first thing to do is to make sure management of nature and the tenant will be able to work together. Because most of the changes which have been done, they don't even consult the tenant. I don't know how they consider them. So there's another area where they actually need to make sure that tenants are well informed, they are involved because they are going through the suffering. They are going through the living on the daily basis. Thank you.
And final question on NYCHA, Mr. Diallo, and then I have to come back to Mr. Filius because I forgot to ask you this final question. Mr. Diallo, what is your position on the RAD program?
I totally support it because why? It removed the United tenant as a tenant-landlord relationship to the Section 8. People that live in the Section 8 development, they are much more better because at least the manager is much more functional. The only problem sometimes you might have is during the recertification. If your income goes up or you want to include a new family member or one family member move out with all of this. But I totally support the RAD program because it's better system for the for nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Diallo. Mr. Filius, I forgot to ask you that final question. What is your position on the RAD program?
All right. Well, I will start with a saying that I was taught growing up, that God doesn't create any more land. And if NYCHA is, as NYCHA development, that means that the city is a landlord. And for the RAD program, that means that they're technically selling off or giving the rights to developers to create. But again, the recertification process happens annually, and that is a problem. So how do we sustain our residents currently that are in these developments? So with that being said, I think with RAD, the vision of it seems positive in terms of, NYCHA not having the eyes and the hands to sustain their developments. However, there's a fine line on, giving a property to a new developer, not knowing how that relationship will transcend for decades to come. And that's more of a resident issue. It should be focused on individual housing developments and what their relationship is maybe with the future developer or that may have the rights to it. But it's the residents' opportunity to have a voice in that. So I'm with the residents. So with that being said, I'm not sure. I feel that I want to agree, but I really need to continue what the residents feel. And I know the residents aren't, it's split. Some residents agree with it, some don't. But the vision should be what is sustainable for our residents and our people for tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Filius. So as I shared earlier during the opening remarks regarding our run-of show, we will have a cross-questioning part to the forum where each candidate can ask their fellow two candidates a question. So this is the first round of the cross-questioning. So we'll start first with Ms. Althea Stevens. You can ask each of your fellow candidates a question. You are muted.
I know I was giving a question. All right. So what are your top 3 things that you believe the city should do to guarantee full access to higher education for Black and Brown students?
Who is the question for?
Oh, I thought we were asking both of them. So I guess we can start with.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine as well.
But that's what you said. Okay, but I can just ask one if that is what you want. Sorry.
No, actually, you could go ahead. We can do that.
Okay.
Same will apply for everyone, yes.
Do you need me to say it over because it was kind of long?
Yes, please.
Okay. What are your top 3 things you believe that the city should do to guarantee full access to high education for Black and Brown students? And either of you can go first. Okay, I'll pick. Okay, Diallo.
Your question is tougher than the host. Oh, Althea. Well, okay. There are few things. I believe all of the existing programs in terms of grants and scholarship that comes from federal and state should be maintained. And what should be added to that is to make sure undocumented students should have to higher education, and especially with people that who came here at the early age. I know the Trump administration, try to turn it around, but thank God with the Biden-Harris administration, they have a better plan, for those areas. So I believe as a city councilman, what we can do is to work with state and federal legislators to make sure that higher education become a priority and there is a way to access it. If there is a way at least to have the first 2 years in college free, that will be a tremendous thing. But I don't want to take any position right now on your question. I will have to study this issue more. But I support higher education for people in the resident, because the more you get a higher education, the more you get a better income, and which is really affecting, Black and brown in our society. Thank you.
All right, great question out there. I at this moment I would say, we really need to push on the education standpoint for our students of color, an option of trade. Back in the day, trade schools were the way of life in our community. If it wasn't for a trade school in the South Bronx, my father wouldn't have had the opportunity to work on cars, to get an electrical, license. Like, licensing is key. As if we can get our students out of high school, that is great. But more importantly, how can we sustain them for the future if they don't want to go to school? So that is the key. Like, how do trade schools is one goal. And again, ESL learning, ESL centers is another goal. Encouraging our young folks. One thing is breaking down the language barrier. How can we excel and succeed if they can't communicate? And once we can't communicate, we can't learn, we can't excel. And I believe, lastly, I trade ESL centers, and I'm not sure about the third one. I'm not sure about the third. I might have to get back on you on that one.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens, and very, very good question. I'll be coming back to you to help me draft questions for future forums. I may actually just call you later tonight to help me draft questions for our mayoral candidate forum tomorrow. Mr. Filius, what question do you have for your fellow candidates?
My one question is just simple for both. How long have you been in the district? How long have you lived in the district? That's all.
Well, Amadou Diallo, let me go first again. I have lived in the district since 2004. And the reason why I moved into the district in 2004, as I spearheaded the purchase of my community's house of worship on 3rd Avenue, 3400 3rd Avenue in 2002, I felt that there was the need to set the example to make sure we move up to the Bronx. So as new, development were being built, new low-income housing, so we encourage our community to move in. And it took us almost an year to get the zoning changed from residential, from industrial to residential. So I've been in the Bronx since 2004 in the district. Thank you.
So the cat's out the bag. I'm a Harlem girl. I grew up in Harlem, but I moved to the Bronx, and I've been in the Bronx for the last 12 years. And to be honest, when I first moved into the district, when I first moved here, I was in the district, but because of gerrymandering, my building was cut out of the district. So I have been living in the district specifically for about a year or so now. But when I first moved here, I was definitely in the district, and then I got cut out. But I've been able to gather a lot of support from community members and everyone in the community. And so I'm just excited to be a Bronx girl now.
Thank you. And Mr. Diallo, what is your question for your fellow candidates?
Well, my question is very easy and simple. As an immigrant here, will both of them be willing to choose this immigrant with a heavy accent to be on their ranked choice voting partner? Simple.
Wow. Wow, you are putting people on the spot. Woo! Oh my goodness.
I can go first.
I can answer that. Oh, you go ahead.
Yeah. Well, Diallo, you're my brother, and we talk regularly. We just had a conversation the other day, and Eves is my brother too. But right now, for me, I think that we still have some time that we need to wait, especially after petitioning, to think about what is our ranked choice strategy looks like and how does that move forward. But I have love for all of you guys. So, we're gonna make ranked choice some work, because we have to make sure ranked choice voting is working for our people and they're educated throughout the district.
All right, that's great answer and a great question too. I'm gonna do as a child of immigrants whose father's accent is a little bit deeper than yours. That doesn't take away who you are as a person or anything. It just shows the journey that you came from. So of course, at this moment I would say yes, because we are here at this ranked choice voting time, and we have to grow as a community. We have to learn as a community. This is our first year. Enduring this, whether we like it or not, this is a process, and let's learn the process. Let's conquer the process.
Well, thank you. Great, great questions from all three candidates. I don't think anyone expected Mr. Diallo's question.
He was ready.
Yeah, that one was that. Yeah, he was definitely ready. So
that's why we love Diallo. He's amazing. Look at that.
Yeah, he went there. He definitely went there. So
thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
So we're going to continue with education, with the education questions, and the first person to answer will be Mr. Filius. And my question is this. The Department of Education has a budget of $30 billion with a B, dollars. It's one of the largest city agencies with the biggest budget. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to the educational outcomes of our children, the Department of Education is sorely lacking. Just alone in the Bronx, we have the slogan, not 62, but we cannot deny that for more than a year, more than 5 years, more than 10 years, more than 20 years, the Bronx as a whole has the lowest proficiency rates when it comes to reading, writing, and doing math at grade level. And then we cannot dispute the graduation rates with the lowest graduation rates in the city. And this, of course, includes District 16. So my question, Mr. Filius, and the question will also apply to the other candidates here. How will you, as a city council member, hold the Department of Education and the Chancellor and the mayor accountable for the educational outcomes of our children here in the Bronx and throughout the city?
That's a great question. That's a That's a real strong question. It gets a little. I'm a little emotional about this one. I don't know why. Education is the gateway to, the best of us, and in terms of being a leader and showing where our community comes from and where they're going. I would love to hold the next mayor and chancellor accountable. And first step is mayoral control, right, of the schools. Um, this is definitely a state issue that needs to incorporate measures that allow city council to have more input on what is happening in our schools. The needs, the needs that our schools are heavily influenced about where the schools are. There are many things broken under the system of mayoral control, but implementing checks and balances that the city council can oversee is a direct solution that we can and will work. This can be a measure, though, that DOE is not like any city agency, but it should be, in a sense, because like it's in its own world. Um, every council member, like, that I know for a fact, we should have a parent board that represents our students. Like I'm not a parent. But I'm the uncle of 13 nieces and nephews. I'm the godfather of 7. So I'm very proud of understanding, and they go through every school, from private, public to charter. But their parents are the most, knowing on how their school is operating, and more importantly, how their students are being held accountable. Another thing is we need more gifted and talented schools in our communities. I had the opportunity and was blessed to be in the school that was private because my parents scrounged up, enough to pay for that. But not every family has that opportunity to pay for school, right? But we need more gifted and talented schools. There's no way that the Bronx, that has so much wealth, we're one of the youngest boroughs in the city, but yet we don't have enough talented schools, to showcase that. So that's key, and lastly, I would say we have to find a way to not eliminate the standardized testing, but to give opportunities for more children of color to get into the schools, to these specialized schools. Um, testing is needed. We have to find out who's the best and the brightest, but we also have to understand that our students already come from a different criteria. So you're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Filius. Mr. Diallo, how would you hold the Department of Education accountable for the educational outcomes of Bronx students and students throughout the city?
Thank you. As a parent of students who have been going to, both public and charter school, I know the difference between public and charter school. And I will, as a council member, at least push for mayoral control. That's number one. Number two, to hold the Department of Education accountable for the performance of teachers and students, and to create more after-school programs, and more tutoring program for students. What I see here is maybe the curriculum might be the same, but looking at my children when they go to school, how I am contacted every time, even if a student is late or they never get to school on time, even late for 1 minute, or even calling me at 8:30, telling me, oh, Mr. DL, get your child ready because at 9 o'clock they're going to be in school. I don't see that coming from public school. I think that we need to have a better control. The state government should look at the interests of the children, maybe some way in seeing how they can collaborate with city government to improve that. And in terms of specialized education, we need more school like Bronx Academy of Science. I don't know the testing. I don't think something wrong with the testing because without the testing, you might not be able to know which student is actually prepared for this particular class or not. But I think when we have a mayoral control, that gives the city council more, an oversight, role to make sure things are done right. So with that, I will have to add, more studies on that. But for now, this might be my position on terms of education to improve the student of the education of the District 16 students. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Diallo. Ms. Stevens, how would you hold the Department of Education accountable for the educational outcomes of the students?
I mean, I think it's really interesting because there's a lot of mechanisms that's already in place that we just don't use, right? So like each school's supposed to have a leadership council that like, their parents, there's teachers, there's students on this, and they're supposed to be making decisions and help the school make decisions, but it's not really enforced, right? Like it's one of those things that's required, but there's no enforcement and there's no real structure, right? So I think there's things that in place that we kind of just need to make sure that we're looking at and evaluating, right? The other thing I just wanted to address too is I know both Diallo and Eve just talked about like gifted and talented programs and things like that. I want to be clear. I've been in youth development for the last 20 years, and especially in schools, parents need to learn, parents have to have schools that are aligned to their children, right? Because every school isn't for every child. And sometimes they don't know that, right? So just because it's a talented and gifted program, that might not be a good fit for their child. I'm thinking about my daughter she went to Montessori schools and she was also in gifted and talented programs. But I realized that she needed to be in a Montessori school because it was more around the arts. And that's where her focus was. And she went to performing arts schools, and that's where she thrives, right? So I think we have to get to a better place where we're educating parents on schools that they're picking for their schools, and then also giving them options. We know that in our community, a lot of our parents don't have options. Your kid has to go to the school that's in their community, right? But we have to get to a place where parents have options. And for me, and I tell people all the time, public schools have to be an option too. It can't just be charter schools. It can't just be talented and gifted programs. All schools need to be an option. We need to get to a place where parents have all the right information so they can make the best decision for their child and their children.
Thank you. Continuing on, since now you guys have brought up specialized high schools and the GNT exam, so I'm going to go back to that right now. Mr. Phileas, when it comes to the specialized high schools, as you know, there's the Hecht-Kalendra Act, which was passed in the early 1970s that established the specialized high schools. There are only 4 specialized high schools under the Hecht-Kalendra Act, which are LaGuardia High School, Stuyvesant, Bronx Science, and Brooklyn Tech. So those are the only 4 high schools under that state law. Mayor Bloomberg did create additional specialized high schools under mayoral control, which is Lehman High School, that's here in the specialized high school at Lehman College. Correction, not Lehman High School, but the one at Lehman College. We have the one at York College. We have Staten Island Tech as well. So he created additional specialized high schools. As city council person, would you support the creation of additional specialized high schools, since the mayor can do that under mayoral control?
Well, if you would have asked me that question a year ago, I would have said yes. But now I think the focus on not just specialized high schools, but it should be on internet remote access. Like, we have to make sure that our students, that are working from home now get the adequate Wi-Fi energy that is needed to be taught at home, and less focus on, because once it's specialized, then we have to focus only primarily on the specialized test, and that takes away. But I would love an additional high school within the Bronx. That is a key. I mean, we have, again, so many children in our community, one of the youngest boroughs, one of the youngest not just youngest, but most gifted borough. We have to create a pipeline, but now we have to create a new pipeline to ensure that we have the adequate Wi-Fi service that most of our students are struggling at home. You know, like we have to be focused on that.
Thank you. Yes, there is a follow-up question coming with regards to the problems with remote access and broadband access. Mr. Diallo, if you're elected city councilman, would you support the creation of additional specialized high schools, or do you feel that we just should not have specialized high schools at all?
As a city councilman, I think I would support the idea of creating more specialized high school. For one reason, getting to improve the entire public school system, we don't know how long that may take state government to allow city to take that control. Since the mayor will have the right, and the city council will have the oversight right to create more specialized high school, I will support that idea in areas that it will be diversified in all subjects that will mainly improve students, especially science and mathematics. So I support that. Thank you. In technology.
Thank you, Mr. Diallo. Ms. Stevens, what is your position on this? Would you support the creation of additional specialized high schools, or do you believe that we should not have specialized high schools?
Well, I have to listen to the experts, and that's the young people. The young people have been screaming at the top of their lungs, talking about how specialized high schools are about is about segregation, right? And so for me, I would not support anything that our young people are not for. They're saying that they feel like it's segregation. They've been marching about it. They've had rallies saying this because specialized high schools promote segregation. And in New York City, we have the most segregated education system. So for me, until we come up with a system that just does not rely on a standardized test to get into a school, and it gets opened up, and we can look at portfolios, we can look at auditioning and all these other things that actually looks at a whole student, I can't support. And like I said, I have to also go to the experts, and they have been saying that that is not what they want. And so we need to get to a place where we have a diversified school system so kids can have options and fit what their needs. And that's what I would promote. So I would not support opening additional specialized high schools until we get to a place that makes sense for everyone.
Okay. So the last part of the education topic is a question we're going to start actually with Ms. Stevens. The COVID-19 pandemic hit us March, schools were closed. And we were faced with an even bigger problem that Mr. Filius began to allude to, which was, the lack of access, digital access, Chromebooks, broadband access for our families, our students who are in shelters, but also for families who are not in shelters. A lot of families do not have internet access. A lot of families do not have a spare laptop or desktop that their child can use and do remote learning. And with, again, that $30 billion budget that the Department of Education had, they had difficulties getting Chromebooks, much less Chromebooks with Wi-Fi access out to students. And because of that, a lot of students fell behind. And now we fast forward to September, and they had all those months, and still they didn't get the remote learning together. So my question to you, Ms. Stevens, is, as City Councilwoman, how would you hold the Department of Education accountable for that debacle, but also what would you do to try to ensure that every child, every New York City student has a Chromebook with Wi-Fi access, even if that includes working with the internet providers to ensure that public school students, all public school students, have internet access?
Let's just clear the elephant in the room, right? We know that the rollout was a disaster, and we're still having remnants of it. And I do believe that we have to just get to a place Wi-Fi needs to be free. Like, I don't know why everyone's pretending like it's something, and it can be done, right? It can be done. It's been done in other countries, and we need to move there. It also baffled me that in shelters that are mostly city funded did not have Wi-Fi available for their students. So to me, that there is an easy fix. All shelters should have broadband and Wi-Fi, and all of them should be accessible. Another issue that I had is when this pandemic happened, this happened in March. And like you said, it happened in March. It was a very quick turnaround. Things shut down really quickly. However, when September came, everyone was surprised again, like, oh my gosh, schools are still closed. And there was no real plan. And it baffled me that they did not bring parents, students, and families together to kind of come up with the actual sustainable plan. You know, at the end of the day, we know that kids are having learning loss. We know that over the summer, when kids don't go to school for 2 months, they usually lose 2-3 levels of reading. So I could just imagine how much learning loss students are losing right now with this much learning time loss. So we have to get to a place where all kids have accessibility. I think another thing that could have been done is we could have used CBOs to really help distribute those, distribute the laptops and Chromebooks and things like that, and could have helped with those supports. But those things, they just kind of didn't employ those things. So there's a lot of things that could have been done. I think that we always have to make sure that we're holding DOE accountable, because these are kids' lives that we're talking about. And like I said, we need to get to a place where we have free Wi-Fi and broadband. Like I said, we can start with all the shelters in New York City. All of NYCHA should have free broadband and Wi-Fi at this point. And we also need to bust up the monopoly that these companies have, right? We know that right now Verizon and Optimum, they have these monopolies on broadband and Wi-Fi. So I think as city council and elected officials, we need to be putting some pressure on them to make sure that everyone has access and it's affordable, because that's the other thing. It has to be affordable. So if we're going to say that everyone needs it, for those who can't have they can't have access because it might be too expensive. There's a lot of seniors who are also suffering and has lost connections because they don't have access or can't afford Wi-Fi because they're on fixed incomes. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but I think some of it is just bringing all parties to the table and really coming up with the best solution for everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Mr. Filius?
Well, with this, I think partnering up with our, cable providers would be key as a city as a whole. I mean, if they're providing us with our digital access, then they should also provide us with mobile, modems for our students. And just to piggyback what Althea is saying, that every NYCHA household should not just have Wi-Fi, but it should be the same type of Wi-Fi, the same type of speed. The way the Bronx Wi-Fi should be the same equivalent as downtown Manhattan or other places within our city. So it's just being at the table, no longer standing aside. And more importantly, if a parent opts out to have their children educated remotely, we should continue to offer devices to the families who does not have computer access. So, again, partnering up with my local elected officials, Bronx delegation, special shout out to Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr., who was providing Chromebooks for those that couldn't afford that earlier this year, to at least, alleviate this pain. We can find ways to come to the table, but more importantly, we have to hold those that give us cable access. We have to hold them accountable. They should understand that this is the time where we need there shouldn't be a digital divide at this time. So that's the focus. The focus should be everyone having access to Wi-Fi modems. And hopefully by partnering up with these cable companies, they should be providing that.
Thank you, Mr. Phileas. Mr. Diallo?
Okay, once again, as a parent, I believe that the mayor should have not only, as he did, to work with the Board of Education, but should have contacted or consulted City Council, and as well, parents should have been involved in this decision-making process. Because as parents, we are facing this issue at home. Decisions are made, and we are not consulted, and even local law office, lawmakers are not consulted. Those who live in the district that we can reach out for assistance. The problem which happened is affecting especially the immigrant community. As I can testify to that, even yesterday, 2 teachers called me for my kids or telling me, oh, your kids failed this test here. And of course they will fail, because why? The Chromebook you're sending to home, they have sent me more than 10 Chromebook. Every week they have to replace the Chromebook. And this is Chromebook that are coming from charter school, because they're going to be in the middle of taking tests. The Chromebook go freezing, it go dead. It will not even charge. So what I think here is to get parents and city council actually involved in the decision-making process when it comes to education of the children. The mayors will not just say, okay, since I have control, I'm just going to go deal with my education secretary and we do whatever way. They might not know everything, which is the problem people are facing right now. And the second thing is the internet. The internet, I believe that Verizon and Cablevision have that monopoly, especially in the Bronx. But people have an issue. I know so many parents who never have internet during the pandemic because what? They wouldn't get service. Verizon will cut them off, or Cablevision will cut them off. Children will be without even having the opportunity to go to school. Parents having problem paying rent. Why they will not say, why that will not be a moratorium on Cablevision for holding the bill? Current everything is not cutting you off. Landlord are not kicking you out because of because of rent. Why will Cablevision and Con Edison cut your service because you did not pay? And that's an issue which affects so many parents. I know that as a fact, before people call me 24/7 complaining about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Diallo. And that concludes our education part of the forum. I'm going to hand it over to my co-host, Mr. Mata, who will continue with public safety and the NYPD.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Mona. Again, apologies for joining late. So I'm kind of off with the sequence of, who's going to answer the question first and who's going to go next. So Mona, you're going to have to help me out, or we just rely on the candidates themselves to tell us who's going to be first and who's going to be next in this round of questioning. So yeah, we're talking public safety, right? So we all know crime and gun violence is on the rise in the entire city, not just in our borough, but obviously it seems to be quite high in our borough, especially in our district. We have probably one of the highest gang violence issues in the district, in District 16. So my question is, what is your strategy to address this issue? That's one. And number two, how do you plan on improving community and police relations? Because I think that's a key to stemming the tide of this gun violence. So how do you plan to improve community and then police relations? And what is your plan on tackling the gun violence and the crime issue? So who's first, Mona?
That would be Mr. Diallo.
Okay, so Amadou.
Okay, Mr. Mada, first of all, thank you. I think when it comes to discussion, as a community leader, and activists who have actually worked so many, time with the NYPD. We need to improve the reform without affecting public safety. What also we need to do, I believe, the reduction of the budget, that has affected policing. And I think also in terms of, it is really sad sometimes when you see the gun violence is against our own people. I know we do face this a lot of time during Ramadan, and where people are coming to the mosques or going to churches, and they just want to create havoc. And I believe also, I think, which I will need to add more focus on it and more study, is where to reinstate the anti-crime, unit as an anti-gun crime, because sometimes we need to have some measure, at least to make sure we keep the public safety. At the same time, we have law-abiding citizens that actually need to be protected. We have to find some sort of measure to make sure people are just out there committing crime for sake of committing crime, that held, at least accountable. And the other thing I think that we need to actually include is the community relation, with the police. And they need to get involved mainly to continue the working relationship with community leaders, religious organizations, and community organizations and community activists to make sure people are educated the safety of working together. The community members should just not see the NYPD as enemy, or the NYPD should not just every youth out there is a gang member, or is a someone who have a criminal mind. So I think it's something that we need to focus on. I also support the NYPD summer camp. I think that's something that needs to be, I believe, encouraged, and something that needs to be done every time. And the community and NYPD relation, and actually, I know that many of my team member, Mr. Mada, you can attest, to that. The current police commissioner has been going out to so many community. I remember the last time when he was at our mosques, encouraging people to work together with the NYPD. And we should encourage that as community leaders. To encourage also another area, our youth to join the NYPD. I'm very proud with some of our community members recently for the past year. We have three from our own community have joined the NYPD. I mean, you learn a lot. You feel that, oh, listen, they are part of you. So they are not just, against you. All you need to do is to do what is right. So I want to stop on that area, but it's something that I will need to come out and devise more if I'm elected as a city councilman, to make sure that we have a better working relationship with the NYPD. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think Ms. Stevens is next, or Eves is next.
It is Miss Stevens.
Okay.
Could you just repeat the question just one more time? Because I just want to make sure I heard everything.
Oh, okay. So we're talking about crime and gun violence in our community. And so, it's definitely on the rise. And so what can we do, or what can you do as, as a councilman, as a councilwoman to, to kind of stem the tide? I mean, what are some of the policies that you would put in place? And also, how can we improve police and community relations?
Okay. All right. Just wanted to make sure I got everything. All right. So thank you for that question. So for me, one of the big things that I know that I've been pushing and I'm a big advocate for are cure violence sites. I think that those are important and they're the way. I know we have SOS, RTG, and all those there in the Bronx, and they have catchment areas, but we do need more of those. And for those who don't know what cure violence sites, those are actual community members and former people who were incarcerated and things like that, who are in their community, policing their community. I know the NYPD launched a community policing strategy a couple of years ago, but we have to get to a place where people are are really policing themselves. Another thing that I will also propose is NYPD, they do a thing called what is it, the build the block meetings. And so that's basically where community members come in and they talk with cops about how to decrease crime. However, I think that those need to be community led. They should not be being led by police officers at this time. I think that we have to get to a place where community members are taking responsibility for each other and having conversations on our solutions and what that's really going to look like. So that's something else I would propose. I also would like to also just say that, you know, one of the things that we need to think about is building these relationships back with the police officers, but that is going to take time because we have been over policed. I want to make clear, police officers do not decrease crime. We know what decreases crime, and that is services and resources and jobs in our community. So for me, that's where our focus needs to be. When folks are saying defund NYPD, that is what they're talking about. They're saying taking money from the police department to put in our communities to build things like community centers and after school programs and things like that to keep our young people occupied and off the streets. So that is something else I will be working on, making sure our communities have resources and services, and that helps with trauma and mental illness, because those are the things that work. And just lastly, I think the way we can really start thinking about how do we build these relationships. One of the things that I would be pushing as city council is saying that anytime a police officer is coming out of the academy, they should have to do a community walk. They should have to meet with community CBOs across the district and across the city. They should have to meet with community leaders and really get to know the community before they're plopped in here to say, like, now police us. Another thing that I think is also important is thinking about when we have captains and lieutenants and these supervisors coming in to oversee a station, we have a cop council. They need to be a part of that process where they're also helping to pick these leaders that are leading the precincts. So I think that those things would be a good start. But I also just think that we also just have to give it time too, because we have so much trauma that needs to be healed, and we need more services and social workers and things like that in our community to help us heal these divides that we have.
All right. Thank you very much. Eves?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Marta. Again, to piggyback on what Althea said, we definitely need to work hand in hand with our violence interrupters in our community, like Save Our Streets and Release the Grip. Those two big organizations in our community that consist of individuals that were incarcerated formerly, that were affiliated, that are now coming on with a new light and a new focus for our community. That is, we need to watch each other, bringing back neighborhood watch, encouraging our neighbors to be a part of a watch team and a watch program, tenant associations within NYCHA, the same thing, that is how we get the communal accountability back. I remember last summer when it was the big Black Lives Matter wave, everyone wants to do a mural. We had one that was done in front of Claremont Center, and at first it was frowned upon, but NYPD said, we will allow the community to paint this mural, and we were happy and we were grateful. But next year we would like to incorporate the NYPD to do murals and projects with the community. We do not want individuals that are in law enforcement to police our community. We want them to protect our community. But just like Althea said, we protect each other. And by doing that, we have to ensure that we have the correct resources and the necessary budget to uplift our neighbors. And lastly, I'm proud to say that I've actually introduced a bill about accountability, and it was passed last summer for the job that I do. And it was in conjunction with Councilmember Vanessa Gibson, called the POST Act, which is Public Oversight Over Surveillance Transparency. 60 days prior to NYPD buying any type of surveillance in New York City, they have to disclose it to the public and the NYPD Inspector General. So that is, one step by implementing policy, that would lift the veil of secrecy within our community. Just like Althea said, we have been over policed, over oppressed, by the people that are supposed to be here to protect us, not to police us. So those are a few ways we definitely need to, continue to uplift our violence disruptors in our neighborhood to encourage them, and more importantly, encourage our neighbors, to take on the helm and become a neighborhood watch. And that is not, it's not a sin being a snitch if you are being a good neighbor to your community, because that's what it is. Being a good neighbor brings out good results.
All right. Thank you very much. So we now go back to Ms. Davids.
Thank you, Mr. Mata. So we're coming to the end of our forum, and I thank everyone for joining us. We're going to begin the closing remarks, but I just received a question from Mr. Gene Edwards, who is, excuse me, who is the district leader for Assembly District 79. So he has a very good question for the candidates. I'm going to call this an Althea Stevens type of question because it's a really good question. So what we're going to do is somewhat veer off from our regular practice, but instead of me asking Mr. Edwards' question, I'm going to allow the district leader to ask the question of the candidates himself. And then once the question is answered, and it's an Althea Stevens kind of question, but once the question is answered, we will begin closing remarks from our candidates and end the program. So let me get District Leader Gene Edwards on here. Okay, he should be joining. Mr. Edwards? He's still not on here. Let me go back. Put him there again. Okay, where is Mr. Edwards? Okay, Mr. Edwards, your camera is on. Yes.
Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, could you turn your camera on, please? If you don't mind.
No, I didn't. I didn't do my hair, Mona.
Listen, that's our Black woman excuse. That's not an excuse for a man.
I refuse to look anything but beautiful when I step outside or
let them
when
know,
I'm on
Gene.
camera.
Let them know you got to be beautiful too.
Okay, I'm going to get down to business. The question is this, and this is for all of the candidates. And congratulations to you all in advance. You all are taking a big step in New York City politics. But here's the question. Being a council member means that one can enact laws and pass legislation. What is indicative in your past that would lead us to believe that you can become an effective lawmaker?
I told you it was an Althea Stevens kind of question.
And because I'm a gentleman, it's always ladies first. Ms. Stevens?
Well, thank you. That was a very great question. So my background, I have been, like I said, I've been in youth development for the last 20 years, but I've also been an advocate and I have done advocacy. So I have literally been the person going to elected officials with plans and proposals on what we need to be done, how I think the budget should be spent. And that's how I spent my career. Also, I've been in service to families across the Bronx and across the city, just making sure that they got services, making sure I was connecting them to services, and making sure that they had a better quality of life. So I think all the things that I've done in my past have led me to this place. I have a BA in political science. I have a master's in nonprofit management, right? I also had my daughter when I was 16 years old, and I still was able to get all those things done. I'm a fighter. I'm one of those people who I do not give up. I fight to the very end. So you can be clear that if and when I become city council, I will be fighting to make sure that we get everything that we deserve in the Bronx and across the city for our young people, families, and seniors.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Thank you very much. I pose that question to Mr. Diallo.
Thank you, Mr. District Leader. And it is really an Althea style question. First of all, I have been serving my community, and the very first thing, as someone who was born in Guinea, raised and educated in Liberia before ever immigrating to the United States, I always believe, at least in dialogue. I also believe in consultation. The very first thing I implemented, not only working with elected officials when I was heading my community's organization, especially from Puta Islamic, was to introduce the work of committees. And when I led Portal, which is another African organization, what I introduced is people working with committees. So whereas, you know, as a council member, most of the job are done in committees and in order before even come to the floor. So in terms of being prepared, how to work in a parliamentary style, you know, democracy, I've been doing that back home since, you know, in school government. So I am well prepared for that. I know my time is up. Was that my time up?
No.
Okay, so okay, good. So I also have served as a community board 3 member and a founding member of the African Advisory Council. I'm proud to see my chairman is here as one of the moderators. So every job is done here is being done in committee. So I mean, it's not going to be difficult for you to introduce legislation because you got to go to committees. But the most important thing is to consult your district. Make sure people in your district know what you are doing and what is good for them, because you are there representing them, their interest, what is needed. Those are there. I have few legislation in my mind, but I'm not going to announce here because until if and when I am elected, then I will start to pursue those, you know, ideas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gene, for that question. Well, my history really speaks for itself. Born and raised in this community. My parents, just humble backgrounds. My father was a cab driver in the district. My mother was a home attendant in the district. I started at a young age from being a youth director at my church at St. Augustine's School, to be a tutor at Southeast Bronx Neighborhood Center and Forest Houses as a teenager, to growing into a community liaison, working for public officials at a young age in the district. I learned something at a very young age from former Assemblyman Michael Benjamin, which was the relationships you get in politics may be temporary, but the goals you put together are permanent. And I've taken that from day one, and I've excelled up until now. From working in the city council, being the special assistant to former public advocate Tish James, and then excelling to being the political director of the Bronx Democratic Party. I now happily am a lobbyist for the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU of New York, which I've passed legislation on the state and city level. So I don't just touch the 5 boroughs, I touch the whole state of New York, from passing bills like the Green Light Bill, which gives undocumented people the opportunity to have a driver's license in the state, from the Farm Workers Bill, giving farm workers the just rights. You know, this is what is instilled in me, and this is the community that raised me. I call those that are born in the Bronx from the 80s up until now a phoenix, because they have risen from the ashes. The Bronx wasn't burning when I was born, it was burnt, it was done. And just as phoenixes, we raise from the ashes. And currently, right now, as male district leader of the 77th district, and as your counterpart, I've been always up front and working for the community and for the people. And this is why I'm here. And I would love the opportunity to become the next councilman of the 16th Council District. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards, for that question. So we are going to conclude our program, and we'll start with closing remarks from the candidates, and then closing remarks from Mr. Mata. So Mr. Diallo, you have 2 minutes for your closing remarks. Tell your constituents in District 16 why they should vote for you.
Thank you, Ms. Mona, for hosting us. Thank you, Mr. Mara. And thank you, Ms. Althea, Mr. Eve. Those are my counterpart in this interview. Well, I'm a proud American as an immigrant who have lived here for more than 20 years, who have interacted within the community, been a community organizer, community leader. I am so proud that I know when we used to be back home, like in Liberia, where I grew up, our dream, is to come to America and do your college and go back and start running for politics. But things changes now. Now we want to make sure we practice politics in America. So I am so proud as a beneficiary, a successful businessman that I founded 3 companies, 3 organizations here, working here, and also been part of multiple organizations within the African community here. I feel that it is a duty bound to give back to my community. And the best way to share my American dream is being part of the decision-making process where the laws that affect the residents of the District 16 are made. And the best place to start with that is the City Council of New York. So I'm so proud. I'm so happy. I was first an immigrant, now an American citizen. I want to lay the foundation to make sure that the American dream is here and it is real, and for future generations to practice it. So thank you for hosting us. I'm so happy to be part of this forum. Thank you. And it is my pleasure to be a candidate for District 16 City Council 2021 year election. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Diallo. Ms. Stevens.
Once again, thank you for hosting us, Mona and Marta and little Miss Davis. And thank you, my brothers Eves and Diallo, for both being here tonight. It was a great, lively conversation. I'm just really excited about the future of the Bronx. I keep saying that because I just think that we're at a very critical moment, and just to have leaders in this district and in this Bronx that we're going to lead the Bronx into a very positive and amazing next step. So I'm really excited about the future of the Bronx, and thank you guys for being here. And I just want to say, I think the last question I did already started talking about my summary, where it's like, I'm a fighter and I'm just here to really be in service to my people. I do believe that, the Bronx is on a rise, and I want to be a part of that. And the work that I've done in my past has really led me here. I'm ready to fight and stand up for our young people, for our seniors and our families, to demand what we should have been getting already. I think that we've had electeds who've been fighting and been on the front line and has really been pushing positive legislation, has been doing a lot of things. And I think it's important that we continue to push. I stand on the shoulders of 2 amazing Black women who held this seat. And so for me to be able to even stand here today, it's because of the work that they've done. So special shout out to Vanessa Gibson and Helen Foster, who held the seat before me. And I hope that I can continue to make people proud, to make sure that we have a seat at the table. It is important that we have women at the table. And as most of you guys know, City Council has only 13 women. And so for me, it is important that we hold this seat and make sure that we have women at the table. And just a special shout out to all our essential workers and everybody who's been on the front lines in this pandemic, because I think it's important that we always uplift them and make sure that we're highlighting them. And, my daughter, she's also an essential worker and she works in the hospital and she's been on the front line since the beginning of this pandemic. So I just want to give a shout out to them.
Mr. Phileas.
Thank you, Mona. Thank you, everyone, for tonight. Definitely appreciate the time. So the next individual that will represent the 16th will have an opportunity to lead the community for the next decade. A leader that has successfully passed legislation in both city and state government, a leader that will hit the ground running from day one and can collaborate with change agents and bring the needed resources our community is yearning for. That's what the district needs. More importantly, that's what the Bronx needs. And that's why I'm running for this seat. I pray that my opponents and constituency appreciates that mission as well. So if you want to learn more, please visit my website, nyceves.com. I would love your support. I love your understanding. More importantly, I appreciate everyone that's here at this moment. This is a difficult time. I would have never thought that we would be here, but this is where we are. My favorite, another saying is, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. So let's just live with the faith, because we only walk by faith, not by sight. And I appreciate the time here. Just like you out there, I do stand on the shoulders of great women. Of course, my mother is one, but more importantly, there was someone who instilled the political bug in my life, and that was the late great Estella Diggs, who was the first woman elected in the assembly in the Bronx. And she famously said, I went to Albany poor and I came back from Albany poor. It didn't matter about the resources and what was needed, but more importantly, what was done. And that's why I'm here, to make things happen. So thank you, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Phileas. And before I forget, we also need to get for our viewers the websites for Ms. Stevens and Mr. Diallo. Ms. Stevens, what is your website?
My website is Althea, 4, citycouncil.org. Again, that is Althea, ALTHEA, 4, citycouncil.org. And I'm also on social media. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook.
Thank you. Mr. Diallo, your website?
It's amadoudiallo.nyc. Simple, the one and only Amadou Diallo. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Diallo, Ms. Stevens, and Mr. Phileas. And now I'll hand it over to my co-host, Mr. Mata, for closing remarks as well.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mona, as always. So I just want to remind our audience tonight that tomorrow we would have the Mayoral Forum, in case you haven't mentioned it yet. You can repeat that during your closing remarks, by the way. We just want to make sure people tune in tomorrow evening from 5 o'clock. We would have, all the mayoral candidates, at least most of them tomorrow. So hopefully everyone can join us then. But I want to thank, the three candidates, or two brothers and a sister who are vying to represent, my district. Again, as I said, I live in District 16, so I have a serious interest, and I appreciate, everyone and their vision, and I can see that definitely District 16 is really lucky to have any one of you represent us. I know that, if any one of you wins, I believe that, we all have the interest of the community at heart. So, not a single one of you is going to say, well, I didn't win, so I'm not going to help the person who won to help to raise the level of the community. So I am really counting on cooperation, all the way down the line, the same way we've been doing so far. I haven't seen any negative campaigning, and I hope it stays that way. as I said, this is a family, and this was a conversation, not a debate. I think people were expecting, I know some people were expecting to see some fireworks, but we don't do that in our family. We discuss issues, and we find solutions, and I think that's what we did. So I want to thank you guys for a wonderful conversation, and more importantly, I want to thank Mona, Little Africa Bronx News, as always, for a great job. Let's keep it up. Let's find out what our leaders are doing for us, and let's find out what they have in store for us. And I appreciate all the candidates forum that you have done so far. And let's keep it going. Hopefully, all of you can join us tomorrow evening for the Mayoral Forum. And on that note, I want to thank you. And once again, apologies for being late, but I was still out there doing some of the work that people have laid on my shoulder, which is visiting and comforting the family of the young lady that her son allegedly killed her. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone, and have a good evening and enjoy the Super Bowl. Watch TiVo the Super Bowl and watch it after the Mayoral Forum. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mata. And thank you to our candidates for City Council District 16, Ms. Althea Stevens, Mr. Yves Filius, and Mr. Amadou Diallo. I'd also like to thank Maimuna Davids, our timekeeper, and our communications director here at Social Impact Strategies, for doing the time for all of these forums and for putting everything together, the questions, the format, and all that you see. Yes, as Mr. Mata said, tomorrow is our mayoral candidates forum. We hope that you join us tomorrow. It is from 5:30 through 8:30. And the mayoral candidates attending the forum are Eric Adams, Scott Stringer, Ray McGuire, Maya Wiley, Diane Morales, Joycelyn Taylor, and Quanda Francis. So we hope to see everyone tomorrow evening for this mayoral forum. Send us your questions that you have for the candidates. If you log on Zoom, you can ask the candidates questions in the chat. But we hope to see you tomorrow. And again, thank you everyone for joining us here at LittleAfrica Bronx News for our City Council District 16 Forum. Our next City Council forum is going to be coming up soon. We'll send you the information for that, but it will be for District 15, which is having a special election on March 23rd. So with that being said, thank you so very much to the candidates for joining us, to my co-host, to my baby girl down there, Maimuna Davids, for all of her help and her support. And, have a good evening, everyone. See you here tomorrow, and let's get some answers from these mayoral candidates. God bless and have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.